Seth, we've pushed this event out as speaking to our what I feel is the UK's or the UK's youngest commercial pilot. Is that the acronym? Did we misuse that, or that's correct?
Correct. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, great, fantastic. Well, we've been speaking ahead of this event, obviously, and now that we're logged in, I just remind everyone that if anyone's got the opportunity to ask any questions, then please do put them in the chat, and I will put them to Seth. But it will seem like, I suppose, a really good start, Seth. And this was fascinating for me, for someone that isn't in the sector, that isn't in airlines, and isn't in aviation. How does one go about becoming a what's the process involved, for those that don't know, in getting to a situation that you're in terms of training, in terms of being able to hold that accolade? I've always been aware it's something that it takes an amount of time, and but it'd be good to get it'd be good to hear your experience about it.
So in order to become a commercial pilot, you have to go through an 18 to 24-month training course, which is basically split into two parts, which is 830 hours of theory and 250 hours of flying. Now, dependent on where you train, the way in which this is split up varies. So how I did at the flight school in Greece I attended was that we had 5 phases of flying and 3 phases of theory. So it was basically phase 1, and then phase 1 and 2 of flying, followed by phase 2 of theory, then followed by phase 3 of flying, then phase 3 of theory, and then followed by phase 4 and 5. And that took me around 17 months or 18 months in total. And then upon completion, you're now able to go and look for it as a commercial pilot. So you send out CVs to airlines, corporate companies, and depending on where in the world the requirements in order to start vary. So depending on the company, require 5,000 hours on a certain type of aircraft, and some companies will fresh out in order to for them for the next 5, 10, 50. However, that does according from company to company, but the standard of training and the license remains.
So one thing I just wanted to jump on there, so you mentioned that before you were going through the process of applying for a role with a particular airline, you said it took you 17 months to do the page. Is that a usual amount of time? Does it take some people a lot longer, or is that is it just sort of a set standard?
The commercial license between 16 and 24 months, dependent on the speed at which you complete the training. So it depends on the availability of aircraft, the weather when it comes to flying, how quick you complete the subject. So in my batch, first person to complete everything, I completed my subjects first time passes with an average of over 90% across 14 subjects, and I completed all of my flying within the given period. However, exams not being taken at the school, you have to go to the Civil Aviation Authority to your exams. Some people do tend to slack and fall off, and that could then lengthen the process and the time of your training.
Okay, fine. So how old were you when you finished this? So when you did your 17 months of training, and then it sounds like the next challenge was to find an airline that would let you take that next step. So how old were you when you were going through this?
So I started when I was 17 and 2 weeks old is when I started my flight training. I just turned 17, and I graduated at 18 and 4 months or 5 months, I believe it was. And then was end of 2019 when I graduated in September 2019. And then going into 2020, I was recognized as the youngest ever qualified, approached by one of the largest airlines globally to come and fly for them. To the pandemic, that was put on hold, and it was now like, okay, what do I do next? Because I only had GCSE O levels, I didn't have a degree to fall back on, and I didn't know anything else to do besides aviation. That was all I knew. That was what I was qualified in, and that was my passion. Period of last year, I sent out hundreds of phone calls, reached out to directors of companies on LinkedIn, to recruiters on LinkedIn. I messaged anybody who was willing to listen on LinkedIn. I emailed, I went up and I found it on the internet, found a list of all chartered companies in the UK. And to my surprise, there was no luck with that. But eventually, there was one person I managed to get in a conversation with on LinkedIn with the company I'm at now. And initially, we're looking for an American that was in, I think, June or July of last year. And then in September, they started looking for European and British licensed pilots. I was like, okay, I'm available. This is my CV. 3 days later, they got back to me and they're like, sorry, Seth, we're looking for people who have a lot more experience than yourself. So I was like, okay, that's a bit of a bummer. But anyway, I kept on reaching out to more and more people. And then December of last year, I just checked in with the guys like, hey, how you doing? Hope you're well. Is there any possibility that someone may have, you're still recruiting? And at that time, he's like, sorry, Seth, we don't have anything. The boss of the company, he's been in hospital for the last week. I'll update you back in January. So Christmas time, I just sent, I wished him Merry Christmas. New Year's, I wished him a Happy New Year. And I just said, I hope the boss is doing well. Just general courtesy to him and like checking in if they had anything. And 2 weeks later, he called me on a Friday morning. So I was speaking to someone else on the phone. Why is he calling me? There's no reason for it to be calling me. So I picked up the phone. Has someone through the typewriting course is starting with us, starting on Sunday. Are you available? I'm like, yeah, I'm more than available. Then he's like, okay, I've got a call with the boss in 1 hour. It's not 100% confirmed, but I'll let you know if it goes through. So an hour later, he called me and he's like, okay, Seth, everything's good to go. On Sunday, you're going out to start your typewriting course.
Wow. So this is, so just to put this into context of where we are in the, you know, in where this was in contrast to what was happening all over the world with airlines. You know, from your point of view, you had that secure, you had something secured at a, you know, a large airline. You know, understandably, huge amounts of disruptors to the sector. There's lots of experienced pilots at the moment that aren't flying for, you know, that means for, you know, for these bigger airlines. You know, I think one of the key messages that came across in our chat is, I suppose it was that, you know, that persistence. You know, when we spoke about it last time, hundreds of emails and relentless, I suppose, pursuit in the opportunity that got you, you know, got you in the ability to get flying, you know, you know, to get there. Is there anything that, you know, knowing what you know now, anything you would have done, you would have approached differently? Is there anything you think you could have got there, quicker? Were there any key learnings that you took from that, you know, 9-ish months of seeking, you know, the ability to fly, looking for an employer?
Yeah, so initially through the whole process, there was a learning curve. So initially what I was doing, I was just sending an email out with my CV. Now, I was very young and naive to think that an email with a CV would work when there's 90,000 unemployed pilots who have, of which most have 15, 20,000 hours. So I was just sending an email out with the CV and I was like, oh gosh, this isn't working. So I tailored that. I introduced a cover letter and I put my articles from the newspapers in there. And I got a bit of feedback, but nothing positive. So I was like, okay, this isn't working. The best way is to try and get hold of someone on the phone or speak to someone direct. Because I was sending emails, maybe 95% or 98% of them weren't getting a response. So it's like, most likely what's happening is they're looking at it. They're like, this guy's crazy. He's got no experience in the industry. He's just fresh out of flight school. So mindset to, okay, let me interact with the person, because once you have a relationship, like a friendly understanding, it brings in room for, oh, are you available? And once that rapport was built up, that's when you're able to pop the question. So I started doing that on LinkedIn, messaging head of recruitment, messaging people in the recruitment department, messaging different directors of companies. I even started looking for the CEOs of certain companies and just sending them messages on LinkedIn. And most people didn't reply. The worst part about it is on LinkedIn, it shows when someone's read your message. So every time someone would read my message, I was like, okay, that's good. I'm one person closer to getting a yes. But even though it didn't felt like it like it was never going to happen, I was like, okay, just keep on pushing. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm respond. No one's willing to give me an opportunity to speak to them. I just need someone to speak to over the phone, to tell them my vision, tell them where I've come from, and tell them what I plan to do. So that led me then to looking for the list of all charter companies in the UK, because I saw there was a rapid increase for demand of a corporate aviation pilot. Now, as most people know, corporate aviation looks for highly experienced pilots due to the fact that you're flying very, very high net worth individuals. So I then started calling up companies. I was like, hi, I would look for the head of recruitment on the internet, find the name, call up the company and be like, hi, my name is Seth Vanbeek. I'm calling to speak to so-and-so. Is it possible to put me through to them? So most companies would say, what is it that you'd like to speak to them about? Or we're not at home. And then I'd be like, okay, if they're at home, could I direct email for them, please? So they give me their direct email. At least I know now my email is going to a direct individual. So I'd address the email instead of dear sir, madam, I'd address it as if it was you. I'd say, dear Pete, hope you're well, blah, 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 blah. Some of them would respond and some of them wouldn't respond. And then when I got to speaking to them, this is what I am, this is who I am, what I've achieved. I know I'm not the most qualified, but I'm hardworking and I'll work harder than anyone who is more qualified than me to the company. So that didn't really go, but eventually just keeping the and following up paid off.
Excellent. And what was the you spoke then just to some of those key messages you were trying to get across, what you were about and where you wanted to go. What was the sorry, from where you are now, and obviously, I'm sure, and I hope that, you gave yourself a big pat on the back and celebrated, when you got the opportunity to get in the air. And I'm sure that was it's not by accident and luck that you found yourself in these circumstances. But what does that mean from where you're standing now to where you're looking forward? Having the title, the accolade of the youngest commercial pilot is a big, does that come with big expectations? What's the future look like for Seth?
For me, I don't feel like I've achieved anything as yet, because I'm a strong believer in that I've been given this platform. I'm a Christian. I believe in God. I was like, I've been given this platform impact. So when I'm able to empower and help other people achieve what I've achieved, maybe not being the youngest commercial pilot or someone who comes from a similar background to myself. I was raised by a single mom. So empower people who come from a similar background, maybe it's not raised by a single mom, but an underprivileged background, and help them to pursue their dream of becoming a pilot. That's when I'll feel established. So my next goal I'm looking is to break the record ever captain globally, and that's 26. A lady at EasyJet. Her name is Katie. She's the youngest ever captain, the youngest ever person to be a captain. So I'm looking to break that record. But within the next few years, I'm hoping to open up a fully funded. I'm aiming to open up a fully funded flight training academy for underprivileged people in Africa, and then network with airlines in order to place them upon completion straight into an airline. So maybe it might not be an airline in Africa as per se, potentially a low-cost carrier in Europe or a low-cost carrier in Asia, but just helping people to transition from that period of, I want to be a pilot, to helping them sit in the right or left seat of an aircraft. It's going to take some time because I have to build up networks and industry to get a deep understanding of who I can network and who's willing to back such a project, because it's going to come with huge financial implications. But I believe where there's a vision, there's always a possibility with the right amount of work and dedication of it coming through. And that's what my life's been about, that with the right amount of dedication, anything you put your mind to is possible. So that's what I'm looking to start up in the future, and also an airline in the Southern African region, because there's a massive gap for aviation in that region.
It's quite the aspiration, just to throw in as a throwaway comment there right at the end, and an airline, after I've clapped the flying school, after I've done this. But I'm sure, and my take on things is, it's really, that persistence and the ability to get in what has been, one of the most challenging environment that the industry has seen. I would say one of, but no, by far, head and shoulders the most challenging. I mean, I'd be very interested, Seth, on your take on on the industry and what the future holds. I'm sure there's enough people out there, that can hear, what the chairman of Ryanair thinks and what the
Yeah.
bigwigs are. But what's your take on the future of aviation?
I have a completely different opinion. This is my personal opinion that I think aviation will get back, or if not better, to where it was previously, prior to 2020. Why did I say this? Because every 10 years, there's something that happens that causes somewhat of a downfall in the industry. But that downfall, and it surpasses previous demand. So if we have a look at it, in 2001, we had the 9/11 Twin Towers. Aviation basically ground to a halt at that time. We saw between 2003-ish up until 2009 or 10, where we had the global economic crisis. Aviation was booming, much higher demand for aviation than there was before the Twin Towers incident. But then we saw between 2008 and 2010, we had the global financial crisis where a lot of airlines struggled, people went bankrupt, airlines went bankrupt, something similar to what we're experiencing now. But after that, we then had the largest ever demand for pilots in history. There was a shortage of 300,000 pilots prior to 2020. So I'm thinking, this is my personal opinion, that within the next year, we'll see aviation increase to supernatural levels. And this in two ways, where the government just say, okay, everyone, you're free to travel, you're able to go and fly. We'll then see a massive boom in aviation. The second way in which we will see it is that the government slowly begin to ease restrictions and aviation will slowly pick up. But once the restrictions are completely released, the wheels of the industry have already started turning, and that will just give it that final boost of momentum for the industry to fully pick up. As we're already seeing now, demand is increasing. I saw a post on LinkedIn today that NetJets is looking to recruit 150 pilots in the coming months. So as we're seeing, that recruitment is slowly beginning to pick up, but will aviation be the same in terms of how people travel? I'm personally thinking there'll be a greater move into corporate aviation and somewhat of low cost carriers in corporate aviation.
Okay. No, it's a good point, and it's easy to forget, of course, that there have been hiccups along the road, and that things have come back in in a very cyclical way. So I'm sure some confidence for those in and around this important sector, and others that are sort of tuned into to get a feeling from there. We've had some really good questions that have come through actually from from people that are logged in today. I think one that's really quite interesting is how do you manage your focus when you're having an off day? How does that, is that something that you need to make sure you're putting time in for?
So on my off days, I pretty much I'm just at home. I spend time with the family. I also do a bit of trading on the financial markets, so I do that in my spare time just as a hobby. I enjoy doing that. So I trade on the financial markets, crypto, currency, stocks and shares, and that kind of stuff. So I do that as a hobby in my spare time. But I also go to the gym just to keep healthy and fit, and just my family, because when you're away flying, you don't really get to see them or speak to them. So it's more about that family time on the days off.
Okay, great. And something that's come through from someone else today. Did you feel that you had to work to motivate yourself with the repeated, negative feedback, the no feedback? How did you manage that? Because you touched on it there when you saw the red and they didn't come back to you. Um, it's no ill feat. I can't imagine that came easy to you.
At first, it was something that came very hard to me at first. I was like, you know what? Because when I was first sending applications, like, okay, I've got good results. I've got a good report from my flight school. I'm hardworking. I think I'm an ideal candidate for an airline. So when I first said, we're not looking for pilots, it really hit me hard. And I was like, wow. It was sort of an eye opener, but eventually, as I started doing it more and more and more, I just developed the mindset, okay, if you said no, someone else will eventually say yes. So every no is one no closer to a yes. And that's what kept me pushing that, okay, this person said no. That means I'm surely closer to one person saying yes. Now, it could have been 5,000 people away, or it could have been 50 people away, or 100 people away. I never knew how close I was to the yes. But with every person who said no, it was one no closer to the yes.
Okay. Yeah. And obviously, it sounds like you've got some fairly big aspirations, in networking to get to the, the later stages of your career. And, I'm sure that those skills, aren't going to, go to waste in the future journey ahead for Seth. So no, that's great. What inspired you to want to fly? Where did that come from? Clearly you didn't just wake up one day when you were 17 and walk into a flying school and get it. How early was that, and what was the inspiration?
So in my life, there's only two things I've wanted to do. Number one was to be a soldier. And then as I grew older, I saw pilots and I was like, oh, they seem to have a nice life. And when I was young, it's, oh, they're traveling with loads of girls, they're getting a good salary and they're traveling the world. So I was like, that seems like a pretty decent life to live. But as I began to grow older, it was more, how does an aircraft fly? Because aircrafts are up to 100 plus tons. And as we know, if you throw a small stone in the up, gravity is going to bring it down. How does this massive piece of metal stay in the sky for so long? And that began to grow a curiosity as to into making the aircraft fly. And as I grew older, that curiosity grew a passion for the industry.
Okay, right. That's yeah. Clearly that's stuck with you, and that sunk and got you to where you needed to be. Another question that came through, which I think is a really good point, that clearly, obviously, there's a need for a certain certain amount of intelligence to do what you have, but that resilience and the hard work, which has been an overarching theme of you getting to where you today, how you know how much of that really do you feel is attributed to where you've got to, and how important is that for someone that might find themselves at the foot of a very similar uphill struggle, a very similar task?
So for me, knowledge is key, but there's one saying I live by, that hard work beats talent when talent isn't working hard. So no doubt there's better pilots than me out there. Even with my experience, there's probably better pilots, people who've got better grades than myself, who are better at general flying. But those people probably saw the industry and were like, okay, there's no jobs. But I saw an industry where employers are looking for people who are resilient, who are going to give that extra, go that extra mile in order to get a job. So it all depends on your perspective. And as I said, that talent, hard work beats talent when talent isn't working hard. So I am gifted and I'm good at what I do, but it's about going that extra mile where other people wouldn't go in order to arrive at places and achieve things that other people wouldn't achieve.
Okay. All right, excellent. No, good to hear. And what's someone's asked out of interest? What do pilots do to keep themselves entertained in the cockpit in a long haul in a long haul flight?
So I fly with a lot of long haul captains. Long haul captains, basically, they've told me that they either read a magazine, listen to some music, and when they're not flying, because in long haul jets, there's actually like a crew room where off duty pilots who aren't flying are able to go and rest. So when they're in the cockpit, they read a magazine or read a newspaper or play games on an iPad. But when they're off duty, they just go up to the bunks in the aircraft and rest.
Okay, fine. Yeah, I guess that makes a lot of sense. But look, I've been really, I was really looking forward to sharing your message today. And obviously, a lot of this event was pushed out in our network. And trying to connect people through LinkedIn. I know that obviously you've got a presence on there, but you're also quite. We were speaking ahead of this that clearly, you other places have had an interest in you. You spoke about articles in the BBC, Channel 5, all these sort of things. But how do people best keep up to date with Seth? I've seen you're quite active on social media. You're quite it's how best are people to connect with you, Seth?
So I'm most active on Instagram. I post a lot of my journey on there. So my Instagram is basically my journey from the start of flight training up until now. And I post little clips from every time I go flying. I'll post a video or I'll post a flight on Instagram, whereas LinkedIn, excuse me, on other social media platforms, I check as and when. So I'll be 3 days later, oh, I haven't checked what's happening on LinkedIn. Let me jump on LinkedIn and see what's happening on LinkedIn. So if anyone's trying to reach me, Instagram is by far the best place to get hold of me on Instagram.
Yeah, and I've had a look. I've checked it out. It's very, it's a very nice insight, and getting to see what, what you're up to, yeah, good to keep in touch. So, Seth, I hope you'd be able to sort of hang around. If anyone wants the opportunity to maybe sort of
Sure.
grab Seth at a table later. But I've really enjoyed that, and hopefully in the future when we're offline again, we can do something similar to this, but in a slightly less technical environment. But I've really enjoyed that. So thanks for sort of popping on today. Tina, and if you're okay to sort of close off before we go back to the networking. Seth, I think that's our cue to get. I'm going to ask you for the first time today to get the camera off and the mic off, and hopefully that works fine. Thanks, Seth.
Thanks, ciao.
Thanks, Tina.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Seth. That was nothing short of inspirational. I do like the idea of a flight, a pilot playing games on his iPad while I'm sat on the plane. For those who have joined us today, we'll make sure an email gets sent out to you with registration links for BITAx. We're going to have plenty more of these coming up and plenty more networking to be done. Hopefully it's not too long before we're back in the rooms again. For those who are watching this later or watching this on YouTube, head over to the BITA website, the British Irish Trading Alliance, and have a look at the events we've got coming up. And if you're going to register, make sure you select BITAx. It's a massively discounted concession for membership with us. We've got loads of events coming up, and feel free to speak to any of the board members as well. All right. Thank you very much, guys.